This is the story of Wiggly Woo, a wiggly worm who lives at the bottom of the garden. Written, narrated and filmed by Ippy. Every morning Wiggly Woo would come out of his home in the cool, moist earth and have a little wiggle about in the early morning light. Wiggly Woo loved the early mornings. The garden was always alive with other bugs and creatures rushing this way and that. Wiggly Woo was a very sociable worm, and he would call hello to everyone he saw. "Hello, Mrs. Bee, how lovely to see you." "Well, hello, Wiggly Woo, lovely to see you too." "Good morning, Mr. Spider." "Well, good morning, Wiggly Woo." "Hello, Mrs. Ladybird and all your marvellous children." "Hello, Wiggly Woo," they all called back. Yes, morning time was a very happy time in the garden. Wiggly Woo wiggled over to his most favourite place in the whole garden, the compost pile. Each day the lady from the big house at the top of the garden would bring new things to put on the compost pile, and Wiggly Woo was eager to see what was new that day. A layer of grass cuttings covered the top of the compost pile, but Wiggly Woo could sense there were good things beneath the grass, so he wiggled and wiggled until he found the most amazing pile of household scraps. Watermelon rind, potato skins, carrot tops and more lay together beneath the grass cuttings. His friends had also gathered to enjoy the morning feast, and between mouthfuls they talked about their plans for the day. But Wiggly Woo had no plans for the day. So when his tummy was quite full, he began the journey back to his home in the cool, moist earth, where he liked to sleep in the shade of the leaves at the bottom of the garden. How generous the lady of the house is, thought Wiggly Woo. Every day she feeds us amazing food. Maybe today I should go and say thank you up at the big house. The more Wiggly Woo thought about his plan, the better it sounded. So just before 6 a.m. he set out on his mission to get to the big house. Wiggly Woo wiggled and wiggled along the edge of the freshly cut lawn until he reached the vegetable patch. He rested for a moment at the bottom of a tall tomato plant. "Hello, Wiggly Woo," called a voice from above. Wiggly Woo looked up into the eyes of a large brown snail munching on a small ripe tomato. "Hello, Mr. Snail," called back Wiggly Woo. "Where are you going this fine morning?" asked Mr. Snail, between small bites of the tomato. "I am going to the big house to thank the lady for all our wonderful food," said Wiggly Woo. "Ooh!" exclaimed Mr. Snail. "That is a very nice idea. Please thank her for all this wonderful food in the vegetable patch. But do be careful. There is a little girl who lives in the house, and sometimes when she is playing she does not look carefully where she puts her feet, and she has been known to accidentally step on bugs and things like us. It could be very dangerous up at the big house." Wiggly Woo thanked Mr. Snail for his advice. Once he had rested, he continued on his journey. Wiggly Woo wiggled and wiggled along the edge of the vegetable patch until he came to a tall tree in the middle of the garden. Wiggly Woo needed to rest again for a moment, so he wiggled into the shade of the tree and he curled up for a little snooze. "Hello, Wiggly Woo," called a voice from above. Wiggly Woo looked up into the eyes of a beautiful chaffinch hanging from the bird feeder high above, who promptly covered him with a fine layer of discarded seed husks. "Hello, Mrs. Chaffinch," called back Wiggly Woo. "Where are you going to this fine morning?" asked Mrs. Chaffinch. "I am going to the big house to thank the lady for all our wonderful food," said Wiggly Woo. "What an excellent idea," replied Mrs. Chaffinch. "Please thank her for all the wonderful seeds she puts out every day for my family and friends, but do be careful. There's a big black cat that lives up by the house, and sometimes when she is awake she likes to play with the bugs and creatures that cross her way. She can sometimes be a bit clumsy and has squished one or two with her playing." Wiggly Woo thanked Mrs. Chaffinch for her words of advice and continued his journey. Wiggly Woo wiggled and wiggled his way from the big tree to the edge of the driveway that led up to the big house. There, stretched out on the smooth path, lay the big cat sleeping. Wiggly Woo quietly wiggled past, making sure he did not wake her. Wiggly Woo wiggled all the way up to the big house and up to the front door, but it was closed. Oh dear, thought Wiggly Woo. Whatever shall I do now? Hello, Wiggly Woo, cried a voice from the dog kennel beside the door. Wiggly Woo looked up into the eyes of a golden-coloured dog chewing on a large meaty bone. Hello, Mr. Dog, cried Wiggly Woo. Where are you going to this fine morning? Asked Mr. Dog, between large bites of the bone. I was going to the big house to say thank you to the lady for all our wonderful food, but the door is closed. What a wonderful idea, said the golden-coloured dog, licking his lips. Please thank her for my lovely bone today. Yes, they keep this door closed unless somebody big comes to visit, continued the dog. Why don't you try the back door? I'm sure that door will be open on a wonderful sunny day like today. Wiggly Woo thanked the dog for his kind advice, and while Mr. Dog continued to enjoy his bone, he began to wiggle and wiggle round the house and towards the back door. There in the garden sat the lady of the house and her daughter. They were having their lunch, as it was now midday. Wiggly Woo realized it had taken him quite a few hours to wiggle all the way from the bottom of the garden to the big house. As he reached the big table where they sat, he wondered how he could get their attention. The table was very high, and no matter how loudly he called, they couldn't hear his hellos from the ground. Just then a worm fell from the top of the table to land right beside Wiggly Woo. Hello, said Wiggly Woo. But the new worm said nothing in reply. Wiggly Woo wiggled closer and tried again. Hello? But still the long white worm said nothing. Another long white worm fell to the floor. Do be careful, darling, said the lady to her daughter. You are dropping your spaghetti all over the floor. A large hand reached down from the table and scooped up Wiggly Woo plus the two long white silent worms and dropped them onto a side plate. Wiggly Woo wiggled and wiggled to disentangle himself from the two silent worms. Mummy, cried the little girl, look! The spaghetti is moving. Wiggly Woo looked up into the enormous eyes of the lady and saw her surprise. Hello, said the lady. Hello, said Wiggly Woo. What are you doing on my table this fine lunchtime? Said the lady. Wiggly Woo explained how he had wiggled and wiggled all the way from the bottom of the garden to say thank you for all the wonderful and tasty food that appeared in the compost pile every day. He explained how all the creatures and bugs of the garden really appreciated her generosity, and how everyone in the garden wanted to say thank you too. They all loved living in the garden and wanted to show her how much they loved her. The lady looked kindly at Wiggly Woo. That is very kind of you, she murmured. But if it wasn't for all you wonderful creatures who live in my garden wouldn't be beautiful at all. So it is me who should be thanking you. Wiggly Worm showed his appreciation to the lady, and the lady smiled back. Please allow me to carry you back to your home, said the lady, extending her hand to Wiggly Woo. It's a long way to the bottom of the garden, and you look very tired. Wiggly Woo wiggled and wiggled onto the outstretched hand, and gratefully accepted the lift back to the bottom of the garden. Wiggly Woo was very tired and curled up in the leaves. Thank you, he murmured as he began to fall asleep. No, thank you, said the lady gently, covering him with a few leaves. Thank you and all the creatures and bugs who live in this garden for making the garden the most wonderful place in the world. And with that the lady carefully walked back to the house at the top of the garden. There is a worm at the bottom of the garden, a very important and caring worm, who is now fast asleep. The end. Thank you, Wiggly Woo. Thank you very much.